It's another episode of the Christian Reeve Podcast. But before we get into it, are you subscribed? If not, please make sure to subscribe, like and share the video and spread the word. Because the Christian Reeve Podcast is here to stay. I love doing this and I love all of you that support me. So thank you. And yeah, let's get into this podcast, shall we? Boom! Hello and welcome to another episode of the Christian Reeve Podcast. Today's guest is a podcaster, a professional translator and student all the way from the Netherlands. He goes by the name Kyle Highfield. Welcome to the show. How are you doing, Kyle?
Hi, Christian. I'm doing well. How are you?
Very good, very good. Now, first off the bat, I've got to ask this because it's not obvious on your social medias or anything like that. Where are you actually from?
All right. So I'm from the Netherlands, right?
Oh, okay.
I'm Dutch.
Okay. Sorry, but the accent's messing with me. And please don't take offense, right? But like when I first heard it, I was thinking, is Australia or maybe South Africa? Or I'm getting confused here. Because at first what I thought was that maybe you'd relocated to the Netherlands. Because I've even interviewed people on the show that have done that. And, obviously most European countries are very multicultural, so you get people from around the world anyway. And I don't know, that just threw me for a second. I don't know.
Yeah, I get that. I get that more often than you'd think.
Okay.
But no, I am Dutch. I live in the Netherlands. I'm born here.
Cool.
The accent is just something that kind of came with learning the languages. Well, as you said in my intro, I am a translator.
Right.
That's not without reason. I'm very interested in different languages, so I also want to speak them the right way. And
where did you presumably you learn English at school then? I would imagine, or elsewhere.
See, that's a tricky question because, of course, I did take English classes in school.
Okay.
But I don't know if that is where I got most of my language skills, so to say. I don't know. So the first thing is that in the Netherlands, we don't do a lot of TV series or movies and all that.
Okay.
And so we watch English movies with Dutch subtitles.
Yeah, that's pretty normal.
And so as a child, you grow up listening to English language with the translation underneath, and that's where you start picking up things at a very early age.
What were some of your sort of favorite programs to watch growing up then?
Pokemon, without a doubt, Pokemon.
Oh, I love you already.
I was such a huge Pokemon fan.
Awesome.
I played all the games. I had the trading cards, watched the series, the movies, everything.
How old are you now, if you don't mind me asking?
21.
21. So, right. So you would have been very young, because I'm 27. That's why I ask. Right. So you would have grown up, or at least when you were getting into Pokemon, you probably were getting into it around, I want to say like the Diamond and Pearl era, maybe? Maybe a bit before?
No, Leaf Green was my first game.
Okay, that's what I was going to say, because I'm that old that I literally grew up with the original games and the movies when they came out. But I figured since you're sort of 21 that you're not like that much younger than me. So it's going to be just like a couple of years afterwards. So that makes sense. Right. Yeah. Because that funnily enough, that was the cutoff point for me. Then once Leaf Green came out, I played that excessively. And then I think I was... How old would I have been? 11, 12.
Very
that's
relatable.
That's when high school happened. You know what I mean? And suddenly, girls
exactly.
and other stuff comes, and you forget. But that being said, since we're just talking about Pokemon, just a completely unrelated note, I've continued playing those games. I think they have a lot of replayability, and because I'm restricted by not sort of having the finances to do like modern gaming and stuff. Mm-hmm. I always do like retro gaming on streams and whatnot. So what's the first game I played? Pokemon.
Actually, the beginning of 2020, when everything went into lockdown, I downloaded an emulator on my laptop and I replayed Diamond and Pearl.
Yeah, man. Oh man, I love. Yeah, like even before all of this streaming and stuff, I was doing this. Yeah, every couple of years, I find myself going back to it and going, "Okay, let's play this again. Let's play this again."
It's mandatory almost.
Yeah,
you
it's
have to.
weird. I don't know what it is about those games that are so replayable. Because when I think about it in my mind, like logically, right? Like okay, I've never completed the game in so much as like catching them all. Like for me, completing the game is kind of catching all of the Pokemon, as many as you can, catching the rare Pokemon, beating the Pokemon League,
beating the league,
doing all the story, and then that's kind of it. And I know a lot of people are going to argue with me, right? Here's a really important fact with this. If you're using emulators, it is actually impossible without cheats to complete the game, simply because obviously with the originals you need the consoles or the games in their original format, and then you have to buy both versions of the game. Like this is what I did growing up with the Game Boy. So I'd literally have like Game Boy Advance and Game Boy Advance SP set up, Ruby and Sapphire or Red and Blue, and I'd trade the Pokemon across both of them, right? That's what most kids did, unless you traded with your friends. That's what you did. And it quickly dawned on me, even when I was a kid, that this is just long. This just takes forever. Why would you do this? And then I looked at someone's video on YouTube about this, and they literally show you like what you get every time you like beat the game in its entirety, and it's literally nothing. It's just, I suppose it's just clout. It's like, okay, yeah, I got like a little digital certificate that says I beat them all, but you don't get anything cool. Like, I don't know. DLC would be cool. Do you remember? Let's say like you beat the game and you got like extra levels or something.
Right, something unlocked, but it's not the case, no.
Yeah, and okay, I don't ever normally complain about Pokemon because Pokemon's amazing, but that would be my only like thing that I would complain about is like make it like for example with the original games, you could a bit difficult with that generation, but they did it later on. They did it like if you take Gold and Silver, in my opinion are the best of like the original era, because it's like you got to basically complete the game and then boom, you get to play the whole of Kanto, the original, and you have to go through all that, and they've tweaked it and changed it so that it's different, and it felt like 2 games in one. And that just blew my mind when I was a kid. I was like, wow. Sorry, this won't be us talking about Pokemon the whole time. I'm just... It
might be, though. It might be. We do.
It's not often that I talk about Pokemon, aside from actually doing those streams, to be honest. So,
yeah, me neither, but it's great to find like-minded people.
What do you make of the new stuff these days, like Pokemon Go and like the newer generation stuff?
I mean, I don't want to be one of those people who's like, everything that came after I grew up is bad. But I mean, if you look at them, they don't have the same feel. And I'm sure that for the children who grow up with Pokemon now, it's the exact same as our Pokemon was to. If you look at a Voltorb, for example, it's just a ball. Like, it doesn't make any more sense than an ice cream cone, but still, it's I don't know.
I actually agree with you on this. I think you're very right on this whole nostalgia thing. Like we always look at what we grew up with rose tinted glasses. It's it's inevitable. But with that being said, and I'm going to give a for and against for newer games. Like obviously I haven't played them, but I've seen other people playing them. I've heard about them. I know enough to know that like with the newer generations, we've got an insane amount of Pokemon, and inevitably you have to introduce new Pokemon every generation. That's inevitable. But the good things that I've seen is obviously the game's becoming more and more and more and more 3D, which like the one thing I've always wanted and what would actually draw me to go out and buy a new Pokemon game would be if they made a sort of Skyrim style Pokemon RPG. Like that would
actually be amazing.
That's what I'm hoping for one day. And like the sort of game, and it would be insane, but basically to go from like region to region. So you start in Kanto, go to Johto, go to Hoenn, and so on and so forth, right? Like this would take many, many, many years, and you'd probably, I think realistically, you'd have to do it in DLCs, or maybe you could even do the whole thing like that. But that would be my ultimate want in a Pokemon game, because I think that like, they've done almost everything you could probably do as far as like changing the systems, changing the games, making them more interesting, making them more replayable, right?
Right.
And
Yeah.
now that leads me to the negatives, right? Obviously, like I said, like the fact that the games look better and the quality is better and the 3D aspect is all good and everything. I feel like that's where it kind of ends with the good stuff, because with the negativity aspect, it's like, it sounds like really difficult to play the games. Now, that's going to make me sound like a big old guy. And obviously for the younger generation, they'll probably look at me a bit like, oh, he's an idiot. He doesn't understand. Like, he's just a boomer or some shit, And like, that's a fair comment to make. But you got to remember, like, when the Pokemon games first started, they were really simplistic, obviously. And then with each generation, they got a little bit harder. There was more to take on. But it was still stuff that you could kind of get your head around. Like, really simple example, right? The weaknesses and the strengths aspect. You could always build up a team that more or less could beat any other team, but it would take a lot of thinking on your part. So, and you would probably always have a weak spot in your team in some way, shape or form. But ultimately, you could sort of balance the team out so that it kind of worked like that way. Or failing that, you could probably have a Pokemon that, knows lots of different attacks from different
Right.
You know what I'm going with, yeah. But the issue that I've seen is that now there are Pokemon types that don't have like a type. That's something I read about, and like some that don't even have weaknesses. And I'm like, how does that work? Like, how do you go about beating that? Like, if you're playing actually competitively, how do you play competitively against teams of Pokemon that don't have any weaknesses? Like, how do you
Right.
do that? And that is where it draws me away, and also makes me less inclined, when I am able to do so, to play the newer games, because I'm thinking, well, I like a challenge, but if it's like so much of a challenge that it's near impossible, it just puts me off. I don't know.
Right. Yeah, I understand that. I get it.
But what do you make of that? What do you make of the newer games as far as the stuff I just laid out?
Yeah, I'm not sure about them. Like the Sword and Shield thing, that came out. I had a look at it. I haven't played it yet, actually. I don't know. I like the 3D aspect of it, but I've never done any competitive matches, battles. So I'm not sure about that. But I do see where you're coming from with if they add the Pokemon that do not have any weaknesses. What are you gonna do, right? It's the whole planning out your team and what you want them to be. Like, I got to teach this Pokemon Ice Punch because I have to beat Altaria, right?
Oh, that just brings it back, man. I get like PTSD hearing that.
Oh yeah. It's all about that nostalgia for me. I love it.
I recently replayed was it Pokemon, I don't know, Red or something, and then I did Pokemon Yellow, that was it. And it was a lot harder than I remember. Like, I think I was actually better at playing the games when I was a kid, because as an adult, I don't know, like, I remembered a lot of stuff, but there was stuff that I learned this time around that I never knew.
That
And
is that
it's
that is
interesting.
spot on. As I was playing Diamond and Pearl last year, there was some parts where I was like, how did I do this when I was 8? Like, because there's some difficult puzzles in there that sometimes you just, I don't know. It took me some time to figure out.
Oh man, it's crazy. Okay, let's actually move on to the
Right.
proper podcast.
Right. This was all right. Yeah, let's do
This
that.
is fun. Right, you host a podcast called I Know You. What is the podcast about, and what kind of topics do you tend to discuss on that show?
All right. So it is called I Know You. And what we do is every episode I invite a guest with an interesting expertise, and then I have a chat with them about said expertise and what they have experienced, and then what their general lives like as well.
Okay.
So it's very interesting, and I meet a lot of different people. For example, I've done an episode on coral with a marine biologist.
I read about that. That was really cool. That looked awesome.
Right, and then now I have an interview scheduled with a world champion curling.
Oh wow!
Right,
Wow.
so I meet all these different kinds of people who have different kinds of skills. And then,
oh, sorry. Please
sorry?
go on. No, please go on.
Oh, right. And then I'm just sitting there being super dumb. Like, I taught this marine biologist who's like good at the job. She knows her shit. And then I had the audacity to tell her that girl move like claw machines.
How did she react to that?
I don't. Yeah. Listen to the episode. she then continued to roast me for like 5 minutes.
Oh, right.
But that's the beauty of it. Like, I consider it a comedy podcast, an informative comedy podcast for sure. Because after I'm done being all dumb, I actually ask for the actual answers to the questions, right? So you learn something, and you can see me being an idiot. It's a great combination.
How do you land these guests? Like, what's your process for finding guests?
It's at this point it's mostly 50-50 between Reddit and just my personal network.
Oh,
like,
cool.
As I started out, I found this group of starting podcasters,
right?
And so we have a Discord group, and then it's like, hey, I'm starting out, does anyone want to be a guest on my show? That's how I got my first couple of guests. And then,
yeah, it's a real struggle when you're first starting, isn't it, to get those first initial
as the show grows, it's easier to get higher profile guests on the show.
Who have been some of your favorite guests to have on the show?
Oh man, I loved everyone so far.
That's what I always say.
It's the politically correct answer. Now, I had this tabletop role playing guy on. His name was Sam, and we were just improvising the whole episode. We did zero preparation. We just went into it like, all right, we're going to talk about this. Then, like, during the episode, he was actually quizzing me on his podcast, which I said I had listened to, which I did, but not in that much detail. So yeah, that was a great episode on tabletop role playing. Turns out I didn't know shit.
Have you ever had any sort of like challenging guests, and if so, like how did you actually navigate it?
I wouldn't say I've had really challenging guests, although I guess the main issue is that sometimes the guests love talking about their subject so much that it's kind of hard to get new questions in, because these are real
shut up, let me speak.
Right? I'm trying to host a podcast here. No, but at the same time, I can only appreciate their effort and how much knowledge they actually have. So that's fine. But I would say that's the most challenging thing for me, is to stay a host of my own podcast sometimes.
What about the podcast in general, as far as, setting it up, your research process, everything? Like, what are the challenges associated with just producing your podcast?
Well, I try to do as much research as possible before I have my guest on, because you want to be prepared and you want to know what you're going to ask questions about, especially when you're talking about their personal life. Because their expertise, they are very eager to talk about. But the personal stuff, you have to dig for that sometimes.
Yeah. Have you had any instances then where you've sort of probed and maybe they were like, nope, and then or something like that?
That hasn't happened to me yet. But I can imagine being like, well, maybe we can move on to the next question. But that hasn't happened to me yet.
One thing I always do to get around that is, not always, but if I do have some questions that I'm like, I'm not sure about this question, asking them, what I'll do is I'll ask them beforehand and be like, is there anything off limits? Like I did with you today.
Right.
Or is there any questions that you're uncomfortable with? And a few times there's been people that have been like, yeah, I don't want to talk about this, uncomfortable with this. And I just make sure not to include that. So I feel like that's just a way of getting around that in general.
So what I tend to do is I'll make a Google document where I write down my questions, and then I send them that. Like, do you have anything to add to this? Something else you'd like to talk about, or anything you'd like removed? And so that way I usually usually make that happen. So
That's a good
no
idea.
problems there so far.
There was actually there's a podcast that I'm trying to set up at the moment with a celebrity, and that was one of the things that they asked was that I send them the questions, which I never ever do. And the reason that I don't is not because I have anything to hide, but it's just to kind of, I don't know, I like to kind of keep my guest. I don't want my guest to kind of come with like, you know, like set answers. I don't want it to be robotic. I want it to be conversational, right. Like what this is, you know, because for example, I don't even necessarily ask all of my questions, and a lot of my questions tend to be ad-libbed. And I said this to this person that I was in negotiations with. I was like, you know, I probably will ad-lib because it's just, you know, I don't want it to be robotic. It is an interview and it is supposed to be serious, but at the same time, I want my guests to feel comfortable. I want it to be conversational. I think it's more interesting that way to listen to.
Oh, for sure, yeah. Absolutely.
You know what I mean? It's just because if you just listen to like a podcast interview and it's just like blah 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 blah. Okay, next question. Blah 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 blah. Okay, next. It's just, I don't know. I would hate that. And you know, this isn't a chat show. This isn't like, you know, because I've seen interviews like that, and I'm like, it's fine for what it is, but like, I think you got to look at like the medium that you're dealing with. Like if you're watching like some, I don't know, music awards show and there's a guy interviewing a musician or something, right? Fair enough. You know what to expect with that interview format. You know, it's going to be very quick, probably about 5-10 minutes, and it'll be quick fire. There won't be long-winded answers. That'd be it. But you want long-winded with a podcast.
That's what I was very adamant about when setting up my podcast is I need some comedy in there. I need something to be funny, and I don't want it to be just question answer, because we can do that. I could question someone on what coral is and how long it lives for, but you don't need a podcast for that. Like if I'm listening to a podcast, I want there to be something more, and I think I've figured that out nicely in my case.
So, what are your goals and aspirations for this show then? What do you want to do with it? Where do you want it to go? Maybe is a better question.
You know, I'd love if it eventually grew big and I could maybe get some income from it, because I love doing it. You know, it's so much fun. But at the same time, I'm realistic and I understand that there are millions of podcasts out there, and it's very difficult to make it. But you have to stay optimistic in a way, you know.
Absolutely.
Like, and so we'll keep dreaming, and eventually we'll get where we set out to get. Maybe.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I've said this to several different podcasters that I've had on the show. So sorry for everyone listening who, you know, finds it annoying that I say the same things over and over again. But you know what? It's true. When you're doing podcasts, not everyone is as committed as they should be. And I've, you know, like I've said many times before, I've seen many occasions where people set up a podcast and they're like, yeah, I'm going to set up a podcast. I'm going to do this. And I'm like, okay, chat to me again when you're done like 50. You know?
Right.
It's true. You know, this is episode 73 of the podcast.
Damn.
And the one thing that I always look at is the progression that occurs within that time, you know, because there has to be progression. It has to change over time. It has to get better. Yeah. I mean, the process I always use is try to do one better than you did last time. Try to always, you know, make every single show like, for instance, if this is the first time someone is hearing your show, make sure that they want more, you know, because if you just half-ass it or don't put the effort in or whatever, then a person might come across it and be like, why should I bother? And that's not what you want. Right. You want people to stick around.
I always want my next episode to get at least one more download than the previous one.
Interesting.
And so when that doesn't happen, like, you know, you can't help it, but still you're a little bit disappointed.
Dude,
right?
I know where you're coming from. Like, and this is the problem I have with analytics just in general, both on YouTube, on Anchor, on all the platforms. Like, it's so random. Like, here's a good example. I had one episode the other day that got like, you know, 50 views on YouTube, which is good for me. Like, I don't know, 10 downloads or something. And then the next episode got like 3, you know, and it had nothing to do with quality or something. Like, that episode, like, people enjoyed it. People really liked it. You know, it's just, I don't know. I think it comes down to, you know, the audiences of the people, because let's be real, every time you have someone on your podcast and you're starting out, particularly if it's another podcaster or it doesn't even have to be another podcast, just anyone in general, the idea is you want to get into that person's audience. So with me, you appearing on my show, you know, it benefits us both in different ways. So for anyone listening to this podcast, they'll go check you out. Maybe you'll gain some more subscribers, whatever, and vice versa. I might potentially gain some from your audience. That's the unofficial, unspoken agreement.
Yeah, right.
Let's not dance around it, right? But with that, it doesn't always work the way you want it to. And you know, I find that a lot of people who aren't podcasters who just ask me about this podcast, they're so fixated on numbers all the time, you know, whether it be the YouTube, the podcast, or anything. Like with the podcast, it's always, and I said this last episode, so I apologize, but it's like, who's the biggest guest you had? You know, who's the most famous guest you had? And it's like, don't get me wrong, I want to have celebrities in the show. That would be awesome, and I am trying, believe me. But at the same time, like, you know, it's first and foremost, I want this to be about making good conversations and making good content, so that every time my audience, you know, drops by to listen to this when it comes out, like they're getting something good, you know. And just because you have a celebrity doesn't make anything good, you know what I mean? It's like, because and like what we were saying before, there's only so much that potential celebrities are willing to talk about, you know. Yeah, right. One complaint I always hear, like when people are interviewing celebrities, is like, oh, you know, I wish they'd asked them this or that. Don't you think they tried? They probably weren't allowed. Their PR manager probably was like, absolutely not. No
and
way.
Then there's also the thing, there is plenty of interesting regular people out there. That's one thing I noticed very quickly.
You know, someone said to me recently, and this is stuck with, well, a lot of things stick with me, but you know how it is. Sometimes you just hear something and that's it. It becomes part of your mantra, what you think, right? And they said that every single person has either a story to share or something that they know that you don't know. And that just blew my mind to think about. Like, even when you meet someone who, okay, maybe they're a bit of an idiot, or maybe they're not so, you know, they're not so bright, but like they'll still have something that you don't have. And that just blows my mind. That fascinates me. And there's been so many times, like there's been times on this show when like I interviewed someone, and like, here's something I do now that I didn't used to do before. I go into every podcast with a blank mind now, because I used to go in with like sort of certain expectations, like, oh, it'll probably go like this, and we'll probably talk about this and blah, blah, blah. But the amount of times that people have shared things that I wasn't expecting. Yeah, like I had a guy on one time who like shared a story about overcoming alcohol addiction, which like he just dropped, you know, the fact that he'd overcome it. And I was like, wow. And I thought, okay, I'm gonna take a risk and ask him about it. And I did, and he was cool about it, and he shared it, and it was really inspiring. And I just think about stuff like that, like, yeah, man, that's what it's about. Like with this podcasting in general, this journey, it's about, and this is probably the biggest takeaway that I get as well, and the reason I keep doing it is because I really enjoy just learning from other people and speaking to other people and having conversations with other people, you know.
Exactly. That's what I love most about doing all this, man. That's what you do it for. I love getting to know people, you know. I'm a very social person, and the people you get to know along the way, it's just great, man. So many interesting stories out there, just people who share the thing they've experienced. Yeah, you never know what you're going to get into before the interview.
It's exciting to think about, isn't it? I genuinely get really excited every time a podcast is coming up. I'm like, yeah, come on, let's go.
For sure. Yeah.
Okay, man. So what are your goals for this year? And the reason I keep pressing this goals thing is because I think everyone has a different approach to what they're trying to do. Like, to give you an example, with my YouTube, I've got 3 YouTube channels, right? And I set myself a goal at the beginning of the year, which is not something I normally do. Normally, I just have like long-term, like, oh, I eventually want to do this. But this year, I was like, do you know what? I'll try and manifest this. This is what I'm aiming for. And I said, like, I'll get 1,000 subscribers on the main, 100 on the second, 50 on the third. And I managed to get I've already got one of those goals already. I got over 100 on the second channel. So I was like,
Nice.
this is a good way to think about it. And especially, I think if you tell your audience as well, and you keep pushing that fact and keep encouraging them and keep trying to do these like CTAs, calls to action, it does kind of push that along. Yeah, especially when I started doing that on YouTube, just like doing little things like dropping a promo before the podcast to say, hey, please subscribe. Hey, please check it out. Like, I think that stuff helps. But yeah, what are your goals for this year? Like, what are you trying to achieve this year?
So for the podcast, you mean?
Yeah, let's stick it to the podcast for now.
Right. So, of course, I'd like to dream big, and I'd like to say, well, I want every episode to get 100,000 downloads on release day. But at the same time, I realize that's not realistic, right? And so I tend to have a more like go with the flow attitude to it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we'll just see how it does, and if it does bad, well, there's nothing we can do about it. If it does well, that's great. Actually, funny story that fits right in there. I had to take a short break from podcasting because I was dealing with some personal stuff, some things that I had to figure out. Mm-hmm. And so I didn't check my stats for like a month, right? Which is like kind of the period of my break. And after I checked the stats, it turned out that one of my episodes blew up in India. It had like 300 downloads in India.
Cool. Do you know why? Was the person from India or...
No, not at all. I don't know. No idea.
Cool. That happened to me one time, but on YouTube. I had a guest called shout out to John Lannon, who's like a podcaster, comedian, and it's like a child author from where was he from again? So somewhere in the States. Sorry, I forgot.
Right.
Denver, I think. Denver.
Okay.
Anyway, yeah. So 2 things happened that was really weird. His episode blew up, and one particular clip blew up, which I think actually got more views than the actual podcast in the end, but nothing else did. So every other clip, just 10 views, 20 views, but like the podcast got like 500. I think it's still my most viewed episode on YouTube, and then this particular clip got like 500-600 views, and I was scratching my head because I was thinking like, okay, I know that he's got an audience, I know people listen to him, but like not that many. Like I don't understand where that came from. And maybe it was just he has a big network. I don't know. But it was interesting. And like that's as a scientific mind, and I'm sure you do the same. Like you the first thing you think is, okay, how did this happen? How can I sort of try to maybe replicate this? Or is there something specific I did in my approach? Or was it the guest specifically? Or what can I do differently to keep this upward trend? And it's like I don't know, for me there's just real inconsistency with everything, and that sounds really negative, but it's not. It's just like no pattern has established yet, so I still see it as like being in a growing stage, really.
Right. Yeah. Me too, for sure. Although one thing that I've done that I think helped is in every episode, before we get into the main interview, I do a segment that I call Rewind, where I talk with my current guest about last week's episode. And
interesting. Okay.
And I think for some reason people then see like, all right, maybe check out that episode after this then. And I hope that continues.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
If they then listen to the second episode, they're like, oh, well, they talked about this the week before this. Maybe check out that as well.
But what specifically do you talk about in that segment then? Do you sort of say like, yeah, like what happens in that segment?
I quiz my guests in the episode. So I have like one question about the main subject, then one question about the guest, some personal question they answered, and then something else that was just random throughout the episode.
But doesn't this presuppose that they actually watch the episode? Or
yeah, but I tell them beforehand, like, is it okay if I ask you a couple of questions about last week's episode? It's okay if you didn't watch it, but it's just to get the listeners interested in last week's episode.
Oh, right. So like, literally most of the time they're just giving their off-the-cuff remarks of what they think of the subject and maybe the person as well. Just like, oh, maybe I feel this way or about this.
Yeah, person. Or, I mean, if they want, I can give them the answers. But most people are like, nah, that's we don't like that. Let's just I'll figure it out, you know. And that's really nice.
That's a really cool idea, man. And like I've heard obviously similar things. There's some wrestling podcasts that I listen to that do something similar. They have like I don't know if they do it anymore, but they had this thing where they had like viewer questions from the about the previous episode at the beginning of the next episode. And I always thought that was a cool concept, like especially if you've got that audience. Like when I have a proper audience for this, that's something that I want to do as well. I want to get some more interaction. Like one thing I was thinking about straight away, particularly when I was negotiating these celebrities recently, was, like it'd be good to, you know, ask the fans what they would like to know, what questions they would like for me to ask the guest. But I don't know, I still don't have the audience yet, because the last time I did this, it was for the 50th episode of my podcast. So I did a special with shout out to Dutch Deals, and we literally just sat down and basically interviewed each other, because we'd done like a series of like social media posts on both of our platforms to ask people like, hey, what would you like to ask us? Let's do an Ask Christian. Let's do an Ask Dutch Deals. Not one person sent in the question.
Yeah.
And literally, like we like, don't get me wrong, like I did all the research and everything, and I structured a show, and we had a good time. But I was so gutted by that, and like that also spelled the end of doing those as well, because I was like, look, if no one's going to send in any questions, there's no point. There's no point us just quizzing each other.
Exactly. Yeah, it's so difficult to get engagement like that.
Yeah,
you need to. Yeah,
I know. And it's weird because I know that there are people that listen to the show. Okay, maybe not like loads, but I know that there are people. So I was really perplexed by that, and you know, obviously I'm not going to sit and cry about it and be like boo-hoo, but I was like, oh, that's a bit of a shame. But you know, you just got to keep trucking, keep trying, and hope that maybe in the future it'll be different. But yeah, that was pretty interesting.
Yeah, I totally understand. I know the feeling.
We've all been there.
We've all been there, for sure.
So what do you think are the key elements sort of necessary for a successful podcast?
Well, first you need to find out what your audience wants, right? And people say if you're speaking to everyone, you're speaking to no one.
What do you mean?
I mean that's something I read like in
sorry.
When
I
was doing like research on how to start a podcast, it was like, well, you need to find a niche market, and I was like, I don't want to do that. I want to have a bit of everything. So I disagree with that fact. You can do about whatever you think is interesting, and people will join in if they think the same.
So many people have said that to me, not just about podcasting, but YouTube. They're like, oh, you know, you shouldn't do multi-content because, you know, there's too many people from, you know, coming to your channel from different places, and they'll be expecting to see certain stuff. And it's like, look, I'm trying to get people to be like fans of me and my brand. And that sounds like egotistical, but that's not how it's supposed to be intended.
No, that's exactly what I'm trying to do.
Yeah, like what I mean by that is like you want people to be interested in you, so that when you put any content out of any description, they're excited about that. Like if I go watch some of my favorite YouTubers, like I don't know, KSI for example, right? Sometimes there is stuff that he releases that I don't want to watch. It's rare, but like there will be like okay, if he does like he does these videos once in a blue moon where it's like the most dangerous sports series or something, right? And I just don't like those videos because I don't particularly like sports. But everything else he does, I love. And technically, if it was anyone else doing it, I wouldn't sort of be interested in the genre. Like, I'm not really interested in watching Try Not to Laugh challenges. But because it's him and because it's the way he does it, it's interesting to me. And that's the way that I approach podcasting and YouTube and everything. It's like, okay, I'm just going to do what I want, do what I like, put it out, and, you know, hope that people join me on this journey and support me. You know what I mean?
Exactly, yeah. And then what I also think is important is you need some good audio quality, and you need to get the editing done right. Because if you have like a shitty microphone like I do right now, sorry for that, then it's like people will start listening with certain expectations, and then they may get annoyed if your quality is not that good. I mean, I don't know if that's a fact, but that's something that I can imagine, right?
I sort of agree and disagree with you at the same time. And that'll sound bizarre, but okay, bear with me.
All right.
So I agree in the sense that, yeah, especially with a podcast, audio quality is probably the most important aspect because, you know, especially if not just the video side, but the audio only side, you know, that's the only thing that people are interacting with. So if it's poor quality, it might put people off. But with that being said, you know, there's a lot of content creators I see out there and podcasters who, you know, don't have the good quality stuff. Like even when I started this podcast, I didn't have a professional mic. I just had like some cheap thing I bought in Europe, right? It was terrible. But I figured, you know what? I just want to start this. I want to do this. Like I can get a better mic down the line. It will happen. And lo and behold, it did happen. You know, it happened eventually.
Right.
But it's
no,
like...
I don't want to discourage anyone from starting out with cheaper equipment.
Yeah. But what I'm saying though is that the content. I know I just said that the audio aspect might be the most important thing, but I actually disagree with that. I think the most important aspect is the content, is like what you're putting out there. Because people that support you, and I've had the same. I've had people say to me like, "Oh yeah, I love what you do, but I wish you would, you know, you would do this." And I'm like, oh, I want to. Like new gaming. People say, "Oh, why don't you do new gaming videos?" And I'm like, trust me, if I had a gaming PC and good internet, I would do it. Okay, I would do it, but I don't, and I don't have the means to do so.
Right.
And I'm trying to put myself in a position where I can. It's just not happened yet.
Well, that's kind of what my first point was. If you are putting out content that your audience is interested in, then that's fine. So that's the first point I made. Just need to have good content, man. That's what it is.
Don't have trash content. That's the lesson.
Yep.
I think it takes time though. Like I was listening to some of
absolutely,
like my older episodes earlier this week, and I mean, I still think they're good, but like, you know, I look at them and I'm like, oh, I feel much more confident now. I feel like it's much better now. But that's just growth. That's just how growth works.
Exactly.
You start being trash at something and you get better through time.
I went through my first episode when I listened back, like it's the first time I ever recorded anything. Like, I was very nervous, you know, and you can hear that. And then if you listen to the episodes that I put out now, it's like, all right, I've done this before. I know what I want to ask. I know what we're going to talk about. So yeah, it's definitely growth.
That just goes as well, doesn't it? Like I felt exactly the same because originally I didn't plan for this to be a interview podcast. Like I figured like, oh, it might be cool to have guests every now and again, but I planned for it to be discussion based. But then I just started getting guests more and more, and it developed into what it's become. But yeah, those first, let's say 10, 15 episodes, I was nervous as hell. I was, you know, like I remember on my 10th episode, I had this musician from Estonia. So basically, I'll just quickly explain. I lived in Estonia for 3 years, and I became a big part, like a fan of all of the music there, right? And this particular hero of mine, who's a musician there, a guy called Martin Kuningas, agreed to be on my show. And like for me, I felt like I just hit the jackpot. I was so excited. It was like my 10th episode, and this guy's and it didn't look like it was gonna happen. Then it happened last minute, and I was like, oh my god. And I felt so nervous and so like scared, like panicky, like, oh my god, I hope I don't mess this up. And then as soon as we started talking, it was fine. And I sort of just obviously the whole time I was like, you know, but like I was like, okay, just keep it professional. Keep it like what you do all the time.
Stay calm.
And it'll be fine. And it turned out very good. And I was, you know, after that, I sort of realized like, do you know what? You just have to approach every single podcast like that. It doesn't matter who the guest is. Just consistency is key, I think. But yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. I agree with that.
So let's move it forward. What's it like living in the Netherlands? I know that's going to sound like a weird question. You were born and raised there, but like, sell us on the Netherlands, good and the bad.
You see, that's always such a difficult question to answer. Because
I know.
Like, what's it like living in America? Right? It's the same. Well, it's not the same, but it's the same kind of question. But all right, let's try. Well, right now it's shit. I can tell you that much because
Okay.
we're in lockdown.
Okay,
Usually, I go.
let's forget about lockdown for a second. Let's say like lockdown's not a thing. Like what?
But I need to get my frustrations out of the way for a second.
Oh yeah,
Because
go for it. Yeah.
I used to get a haircut every 2 weeks, and now I haven't been able to get a haircut for like 3 months, and my
Same.
hair is just wild.
Same here, dude. We've been shut since like end of December, and like the barbershops don't open till April. So I'm like,
Right. Yeah.
hmm.
But other than that, when we're not in lockdown, it's a great country. And I know that some people, you know, people in other parts of the world view Europe as this communist kind of place where, like, with your free healthcare and you give all your money to the government. That's not the case. It's not true. It's you know, everyone here makes a good living. If you get sick, you don't die, you know, and you don't you don't get 100,000. You don't get thousands of euros in debt just because you need surgery.
Yeah, that's a very underrated point. Well, not underrated, but like it's a very good point. Like I often think about, especially when I started living abroad, and then I compared that to living in the UK. I sort of realized how lucky I am to be from here, because things like healthcare. I mean, you take it for granted. Like it's especially bad in America. Like I've heard of people where it's cheaper for them to, for example, get a taxi to the hospital than it is to actually get an ambulance, because it would just
ambulance,
and like I've heard of instances where people have turned down surgery because they just can't afford it, or like that the doctors wouldn't operate on them because the person didn't have
because
the
they couldn't pay. I think the differences between the UK and the Netherlands are very small, or at least smaller than people might think. Okay. We're only a small body of water away. What it's like here. I don't know. I go to university.
Right, yeah.
Do some work.
What are you studying at university?
Business management.
Business management. Well, what do you plan to do with that? What's the plan?
No idea yet. If I want to, if possible, I'd like to grow my own business that I'm currently running. I'd like to grow it and maybe turn it into something big that I can. I mean, I can make a living of it right now, but I don't have a lot of expenses yet, and I hope that it keeps growing, and it'll be something for the future.
Yeah, so let's talk about that actually real quick.
Sure.
So it's a translation agency. I mentioned it in the preamble. Talk to us a little bit more about this company. Like, how did that actually come to be? Like, obviously, translating is like a very common thing, but like, how did this happen for you? Like,
all right,
how did it come about?
I was working at Burger King. It was a new job. I had worked there for like a month, and then I got my first paycheck. And it turned out that I didn't quite make what I thought I was making. And so the very next day, I went to my manager. I said, "I'm quitting. I'm not getting out of bed for this amount of money." Right?
Was it a situation where like, was it an overtime thing? Like you worked a ton of hours and they just didn't pay it or something, or?
No, not really. It was more like I don't even know what happened exactly. It was a shit show. But what it came down to was they said you would get like bonuses for this and that, and you would actually get paid more. Right. So minimum wage or something, it went up with how old you are, like your age. So an 18-year-old makes more than a 70-year-old.
Right.
And they said that you would make as much, or how do you say that? You would make as much money as if you were 1 year older than you actually were, right?
Okay.
So that wasn't true. You didn't get the bonuses. And there
Oh,
was just
wow.
all these kinds of things that didn't really work out, and so I was done with it very quickly, right? And then I thought to myself, all right,
Actually,
I got
before we get to the
oh
translation thing, can I
yeah,
just quiz you a bit about Burger King? Because I didn't actually know this.
sure.
Yeah, like I know it's very quick in your life, you know, like I don't want to ask the obvious questions because, you know, I have friends that have worked in this food service industry and I know how difficult it can be. I've worked in hospitality, I've worked in retail, all of those. So I do know, I can relate a little bit, but what were the kind of worst things about working at this job? Like, why did it suck so much?
It was fun. I had a lot of fun there. But it just, I think my time is worth more than €4 an hour, right? If they, I first went to the management and I said, well, I'm gonna need a raise, and they were like, yeah, we can't do that. You're 17. You've worked here a month. We can't give you a raise. And I was like, all right, then I'll give you my 2 weeks notice.
You
Right?
know, that's really smart as well. Like, I know that will sound like really obvious to a lot of people listening, but you know, this idea of valuing your time and understanding your worth as far as, you know, well, your time and also your skill sets and everything like that. Like, you know, there's so many people out there that don't realize, like, well, yeah, just that they should be negotiating more. They should be, you know, if a place won't give you what you want, go somewhere else. Why stick with that place that gives
Right.
you nothing? You know, they're never going
Exactly.
to change their mind. If they say no the first time, then they're not going to say yes the second or third time. You know what I mean? Get out of there. Go somewhere that will give you that money.
Exactly. Yeah. And so other than that, the job was a lot of fun. Like I had great coworkers. When people weren't looking, we'd have water fights in the kitchen. it was,
I guess it was all people your age then, was it? Or
yeah. Yeah.
that's awesome, man.
And
That's awesome. The kids running the show.
right. Yeah. It was pretty great. And then your friends come in and you make an extra burger and you don't make them pay for it. You know.
Did you get
Okay.
any sort of
For
like? Did you get any like crazy customers or anything
Oh
unusual?
yeah, absolutely. People yelling from the other side of the counter, asking where their food is and why it's taking so long. Like, I don't know.
Was there any
It's,
particular experiences that stand out for you? Anything that just like has stuck with you? Like, I don't know, a particularly crazy customer or something super
um,
rude or weird or disgusting or something?
mm, let me think about that. Well, one time I had this lady, um, and she paid in cash, so I gave her change. And she said that I hadn't given her enough change. Now, this was after she had gone back to her table and I don't know, counted the money. But I knew for sure that I did the right thing, right? And so she went to my manager and she's like, "Well, this guy is ripping me off," and I was like, "That's bullshit." And so um, we went to count because the registers, they count how much money goes out and in, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we had to check all of the amounts of money that had gotten in there and to eventually determine how much I had given her.
Right.
And it turned out I was right, of course. But
Right. Yeah.
it was this entire fuss about like, I don't know, a couple of cents, 50 cents or something like that. It was crazy.
I don't know why people like make such a fuss over such small
Some people,
things.
man, for sure.
I've had the same thing. I remember one time I was working in this supermarket and it was like Christmas time. So you'd expect people to be nicer around Christmas, right? No. If anything, they were
No.
worse at Christmas. But there was this one particular guy who came in and we had like a separate till set up. It was like an extra till for Christmas time. And you know, I'm terrible at maths. I always have been. I'm useless at maths. So it was taking me a while to like work out the change. Basically, he gave me more money than what I needed because he wanted specific change back, right? And that flummoxed me. I was like, oh crap. And I was trying to work it out. And basically he's just like, why have you not given this money? Why is it taking so long? Why have you not given the money? Like, I don't understand. Give me a manager now. And like, it just, I don't know. I had this like sinking feeling. I was just like, okay.
Yep.
And you just get people like that all the time in customer services. Like,
No,
I think I think they just forget that you're human. You know?
Right.
Sweet.
Oh yeah, it's people yelling at you while you're just doing your job. It's like it's such an unreasonable thing to do.
And it's like I feel like there's this like, okay, like if that was in the street, if that was just like you take it out of context for a second, yeah, it wouldn't be acceptable. You go at them, right? But or you just wouldn't do that necessarily. But for some reason, in the context of a customer service situation, people just seem to, you know, forget about how to treat other human beings and just are like, oh, well, you know, I can treat them like shit. That's fine. And it's like,
Yeah.
what?
No,
Yeah.
I hate those kind of people.
Yeah, but there's so many of them. It's like,
There
I feel
is
like
so many of them.
that's like majority of people. Okay, maybe that's a bit of an exaggeration, but like a lot of people. I mean, you know, it's like, I've said this before, so sorry, everyone listening who's heard me say this a million times before, but like, when I made the shift from retail jobs to like, you know, more hospitality based stuff when I was at uni, I remember thinking like how easy I'd had it at the supermarket, because I used to complain years ago, be like, oh, I hate this so much, but I'd had it pretty easy there. And then when I started serving people, waiting tables, bartending, delivering coffee, you know, serving like 500 people in the middle of summer and it's boiling and you're understaffed, and like you just see the worst sides of people.
Yeah.
And so, and like even people who are sitting in the sunshine, who should be enjoying their time, will find stuff to complain about and will just be miserable. And you're like, so I mean, because it's the difference between working out when people actually have a reasonable reason to actually complain, or if they're just malcontents, which I find is a lot of people in
it's a lot.
Yeah, it's like nothing will make them happy.
Then of course there were also a lot of very nice people who are very friendly, and we make a conversation like, oh, are you having a good day? What's it like working here? Like, I hope you have a good day as well. You know. Also, what surprised me is how many people give their phone number to the guy behind the counter at Burger King.
Hey?
I had a couple of, I was 17, right?
Oh, well, girls, yeah, like just
yeah. I had a couple of girls just slip me their number on the receipt.
Oh, right.
All right.
It must be the voice.
Yeah, I bet.
It's like, you know,
although my accent isn't as nice in Dutch. I have a southern accent, which most people look down upon, but it's fine.
You never know, man. You never know what the lady's like. Know. You'd be surprised. You'd be. I mean,
I guess
when I hear my voice, I just want to, you know, end it all. But apparently, some women over the years have been like, "I like your voice," and I'm like, "Really? What you like the sound of cats being strangled?" I don't understand. Like,
you have a nice voice. We could say
that wasn't me fishing for compliments, by the way. That's just genuinely how I feel. I genuinely feel that way.
You're very pretty.
Oh, thank you, sir. No, but it's like, you know, especially when you have to listen to yourself constantly when you're doing editing and podcasting, it's just like, oh, shut up. I hate
right. I can't hear myself talk in Dutch, but in English it's fine. If I hear myself recorded in Dutch, I'm like, stop it.
Actually, that brings me to another question, and we'll get back to the translation agency stuff.
Oh yeah, sure.
Just one more question. Don't worry, it's not Burger King related. What was the reason for you actually deciding to do the podcast in English? Because this is something that I found a lot of podcasters that I've interviewed from Europe have tended to do. And don't get me wrong, like I understand the appeal and the logic of sense that it makes. Like, obviously I'm going to do it in English, so it will have more international appeal and stuff. But like, one thing that always confuses me is like, why not have like, say, two completely different podcasts, one in, say, Dutch, one in English, or have a mixture, or maybe even just only in Dutch? Like, what was the decision making process behind only doing it in English?
Well, first of all, like you said, there are so many more people who speak English rather than Dutch. Mm-hmm. And besides that, the thing I want to do is I want to have experts on with knowledge on a certain topic. And I mean, I'm sure I can find someone who plays curling in the Netherlands somewhere, but is not going to be a world champion, right?
Well, it might be.
So the guests that I'm looking for, they all speak English as well, for the most part. So that was a factor. And then I don't know. I feel like my level of English is good enough to actually have a conversation in English with someone and have it make sense. And I just feel comfortable speaking English. And I don't know. I never really considered doing a podcast in Dutch. I'm not sure.
Do you not think it potentially alienates people who might be interested in your podcast in your home country that don't necessarily speak it? Now, I know that's going to sound a bit dumb to a lot of people listening, because they'd be like, well, surely most Dutch people speak English. But you'd be surprised. Like when I lived in Estonia, I remember there was a lot of people I'd meet, sometimes even in the city, that wouldn't speak English. It was normally older generations, and that made sense historically and stuff. But like even sometimes younger people, you know, I remember meeting young people that didn't speak English or only spoke a lot, and it made me think a lot about this. So, you know, do you ever think about that? Or
I mean, that could be, but the biggest part of my audience is from the United States right now, and then there's the Netherlands, and then there's India.
It's so random, isn't it? It's the same for me. It's like last time I looked, it was like 54% US, and then like I don't know, like 20% English. Like my people hate me. Well, they're not interested. Yeah. It's fine. I'll go to America. They'll appreciate me.
Right. Yeah.
No, but it's funny how that split goes, because sometimes you look at those stats. And for those who don't use podcasts, who want to get into podcasts, I highly recommend checking out Anchor, because it gives you a really cool kind of breakdown of the analytics as far as like country by country is concerned. And I've found some interesting statistics there, like of like particular people from particular countries that listen to me. And I'm like, really? Like, why do people from there listen to me? Like,
right.
That's random.
So I have this one guy in South Korea who just listens to all my episodes.
Oh, sick.
Like the numbers don't go up in South Korea. It's just that one guy, I figure.
Hey, fair play.
So shout out to that guy. If you, by any chance, ever finds this episode, shout out to you.
That's awesome, man. He for sure will. Okay, man. Yeah, let's bring it back to the translation stuff, because I did cut you off, but I wanted to push more the Burger King stuff for a little bit. So yeah, it's a translation agency that you've set up. Now, I find this interesting because there are a lot of professional translators that can't speak. Professional translators out there who tend to sort of do work on a freelance basis, so just project by project. What actually prompted you to set up an entire agency as opposed to just doing it freelance?
All right. So I started out as a freelancer, and I was hired by these companies who then, like, they get these big assignments and they cut them up and divide them between freelancers. But you know, I went to think about this, and I was like, all these guys are doing is dividing these assignments. I could do that, right? And so I was like, oh, what the hell? I'm just going to try it. And I set up the agency, and I was like, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work, and I'll go back to freelancing. If it works, I can still continue freelancing if I want, but I have this on the side. And that second scenario is the case right now, where I do some assignments that I give to other people, and then on the side I can still do my own projects that I'm working on.
Awesome.
So yeah, that's kind of how that happened.
And like, what's your process like as far as approaching the translation of documents and text and stuff?
Well, it's quite simple actually. You just have to look at the documents, and then you see if there are any special things that you have to take into account for that specific document, like vocabularies or whatever. Usually the companies sent these, like if there are a lot of abbreviations, you usually get like a sheet that says what they all mean. Other than that, it's just sit down and do it.
Fair play. No, the reason I ask is because like sometimes when you're translating from language to language, like some things aren't even translatable. Sometimes it's like specific to a particular language or culture. That's something I learned when I was in Estonia. That even to this day, like I could relate to other Estonians and be like, yeah, I get that. But like if I try to explain it to anyone that has never been there, it's like you just got to be there, man, to get it. It's
Right.
thing. It's like that, you know.
That's funny when you're translating something from English to Dutch.
Right.
You run into that a lot because the Dutch, they use a lot of English words and yeah. Well, that's the end of my sentence basically. But
and that's the end of that chapter.
No. So for example, if I had to translate if someone said you have to think out of the box, like out of the box, we just say out of the box denken, and then denken is thinking.
Yeah. I know what you mean. Like, especially like I have a flatmate, for instance, who's Portuguese. He doesn't speak any English. He's learning, but it's hard for him. He's only recently come to the UK, and sometimes I'll just say, you know, like a saying that I think nothing of, right? And then he'll ask me, "Oh, what does that mean?" And then I'm like, oh, how do I explain that? Like, because again, it comes back to what I said before about like some things are specific or it is just an expression, but like people know exactly what you mean straight away. But it's very difficult to explain it because it's more of like a way of summing up a feeling or a situation or it's like a metaphor for something. And it's like, how? What? Where do I even start?
Right. Yeah, totally. Hey, I have an idea. If you're interested, I was a guest on a podcast some time ago. It was a comedy podcast, and we did a segment where I read out some Dutch words and I had them guess what they mean. So I can see if I still have a file, and I can see if I can see how good you are in Dutch.
Oh, speaking Dutch or just figuring?
Oh no, if you can figure out what they mean,
I'll give it a go. I mean,
right.
The closest thing I know a little bit to Dutch is probably German, but that's not really it's kind of similar, but not.
I mean, it's similar. It's similar. Maybe it will be an advantage.
This will be interesting.
Going to see if
the most I know how to say in Dutch is there's this song by a guy called Lil Klein. And I know like one verse from that song, but I don't really know what it means.
Drank en drugs.
Yeah, I think it is. What? It's the bit where he's like, it's like, as a bitch feel chilling, I treble plane, dan hanka, hen, dan hanka, drunk. And
yes,
you get drunk. And dukes. Something like that.
Amazing. Yeah. Yep. It's I can translate it for you. He says, if your bitch wants to hang out, it's not a problem. I will go there because I have booze and drugs. That's all he says. And then he just repeats that over and over.
That's just worse. Straight to the point, isn't it?
Yep. Yep.
Good stuff.
All right. I have actually found the file. I still had it.
Okay.
So just as a warm-up round, let's do this one. All right. Kindercarnavalsoptocht voorbereidingswerkzaamheden.
What? Say that again, slower.
Kindercarnavalsoptocht voorbereidingswerkzaamheden. It's one word.
It's one word? Hard.
Yeah.
Is it something to do with kids?
Yeah, it's when there's a carnivals parade for children, you have to do preparations. And that's what that word means.
Because I heard Kindler and I was like, I know in German, Kind is kid.
Yeah.
So.
Right.
Cool.
And so in Dutch, you can basically just keep adding nouns, and it will still be one word.
That's ridiculous.
So that is ridiculous. Yeah. All right. We'll do one. I have some multiple choice ones if you want.
Sure. Okay. Let's fire.
The next one is kikker. Is it A, a frog, B, a soccer player, or C, cauliflower?
Say it again.
Kikker.
Is it cauliflower?
No, it's a frog.
I knew it wasn't a soccer player because I was like, nah, that's a trick. That's a trick.
It was.
answer.
It was too obvious, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
All right. We'll do one more, or maybe more if you want. It's fine. Pindakaas. Is it A, a pigeon, B, peanut butter, or C, a plumber?
Say the word again.
Pindakaas.
Plumber?
No, it's peanut butter. It literally means peanut cheese.
Peanut cheese. Oh, that sounds wrong.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. So yeah, that's the crazy language that we call Dutch.
That Dutch is cool. Dutch messes with my head, man, because it's like, it sounds like, to me, it sounds like German meets English, but not, because it's its own language. And it just messes with my head so much. And Danish is the same as well. Danish sounds weird in my head. It's, I don't know.
The Scandinavian languages are very similar to like Dutch and German.
Right.
I actually learned Swedish in like a couple of months because it was just so similar to Dutch in everything, in every aspect.
Wow, I didn't know that they were shared in some sort of straight some blah, 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 some shape or form. And do they have like a lot of shared words, or is it just similar sounding or something?
No, similar sounding.
Mm.
But then I also already knew German, right?
Ah, okay, that helps.
And so some parts were similar to Dutch and some parts were similar to German, and you just pick it up very quickly because it's all the same language family.
Cool. Yeah, let's move it forward.
Right.
Who do you draw inspiration from?
Christian Reeve.
No, but seriously.
Right. My favorite comedian, actually, Jim Jeffries. He is. I don't know if you've ever heard of him.
Is he the guy that does the puppeteering?
No, that's Jeff Dunham, I think.
Okay, then I don't know who this guy is.
No, this is an Australian comedian.
Hang on. Is he the guy that does like really like how can I put this? Risque humor, let's put it that way. Like he famously did a joke about Islam that was pretty brutal or something.
I'm not sure about that. He is famous for his routine on gun control.
I think I know the guy you're on about.
Right, and he's just super funny. But then when you hear him talk about life and the things he has gone through, like substance abuse and depression and things like he's very open about that. I think all around he's just a very inspiring guy because
cool.
I don't know, he copes using comedy, and that's great. I think people should laugh more.
Is that something that you do as well? Do you use comedy as a sort of way of therapy, or to? I don't know, just to
for sure, yeah. When I get uncomfortable somewhere, I start trying to be funny, or I just start laughing just to get out of the situation. It's a defense mechanism almost.
It's not a bad way of like it's kind of similar in the UK actually. There's this joke that like whenever you first meet another Englishman, like, you know, it's the first to crack a joke, you know what I mean? Like break the tension, break the ice, sort of thing. And it's a weird thing that we always try and make each other laugh, but it's like, that's how, I don't know, we at least feel comfortable around each other, is by laughing. Like you say, it's a good way of just making everyone feel at ease, I suppose.
Right.
Yeah. Cool, man. Cool.
Yeah.
So this is a bit of a deeper question. but I've
All
been
right.
asking my guests this lately, and it always gets a unique response. What is the biggest life lesson that you've learned so far?
Well, that's quite a lot to just lay down on someone, man. It's
Well, you're not the first, you won't be the last. So,
all right.
and also most people react that way as well. Go, where do I begin? That's
Life
exactly what I
lesson.
would do as well. That's exactly what I would do.
Life lesson.
Or maybe something that you live by specifically
Yeah.
that's unique to your life.
I'm thinking. I wasn't prepared. I thought we were just having fun. No. The life lesson that I've learned is just be honest, right? If you don't like something, you should say it. If I don't know, there's just so many situations in my life where I've thought like just a simple white lie, you know, where looking back, I think like should have just been honest. It would have been much easier. And I think that goes for a lot of people, because sometimes it's easier not to say something or not to say what's on your mind, but it never works out in the long term.
Yeah.
And so if you want to find long-term solutions to problems, or you have issues with someone else, just communicate and be honest with each other.
Yeah, couldn't agree more, man. Yeah, a lot of the time I think it comes down to these simple things as well. You know, just in my life, it's always been that case. Like since I decided to just be 100% truthful in my own life, it has been a lot easier. Like sometimes you will have people who can't face the truth, or who are like, you know, they don't like hearing it, but it's like that's their problem. At the end of the day, like,
yeah,
truth and honesty, in my opinion, is a sign of respect. It's a sign of like, you know,
absolutely.
you're trying to say to that person, like, you know, I will tell you the truth regardless of whether it's bad or not, you know. And that's the problem. Like, people don't want to. People worry. I think it comes down to judgment. People worry what other people will think of them if they tell the truth, and it's like,
that is very accurate. Yeah,
you know, no one's perfect. I don't know where this idea of perfection came from, but you know, I mean, we've all messed up. Like, best thing you can do is just be honest about it, own it.
absolutely. Yeah, and then for me, I would rather be upset by the truth than comforted by a lie. And that's kind of a cliche expression, but it's so true.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, and especially if you know that it's a lie as well. Like you just you try to live by a lie. It's like, it's not going to happen, man. Like, you got to face reality sooner or later.
Yeah.
Okay, as we draw things to a close for today, I just want to ask you one final question.
All right.
Do you have any upcoming projects, or maybe some final thoughts that you'd like to share with us?
You know, I don't have any new project that I'm working on, but I'm planning on just keep growing the podcast and keep working on that. And then my business, that's mostly it. So if I can make an appeal to your listeners, I just ask them to go check out my podcast. It's on iqipodcast.com or on every podcast platform. It's called I Know You, and I'm Kyle Highfield. So yeah, that's all that I'm working on for now, but I'll let you know if something new comes up.
Excellent. Yeah, want to say a massive thank you for appearing on the show. It's been an absolute pleasure having you. And yeah, to all my listeners of the Christian Reeve Podcast, I hope you've enjoyed this episode. If you did, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe on YouTube. Leave us a comment. Let me know what you think. And yeah, if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, leave us a review. Make sure you're following if you're not already. Give us a rating. Let us know if you think the podcast is great or you think it's trash. Let us know either way. And yeah, if there's any particular guests you'd like to see on the show in the future, or maybe some particular topics you'd like to hear, get in touch with me. Let me know. My ears are open. My DMs are open. I want to know what you want to hear. Thank you very much for listening to the podcast. And until next time. Peace out. One love. I'll see you in the next one.